Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning if you're signing in from the West Coast to the U.S. For those of you in the U.K., good evening. My name is Amy Collins, and I am here with New Shelves Books, but I am mainly here with a woman who, over the last few years, I have come to respect deeply for her commitment to authors and the business world, not only women in business, but business owners all over, because she shares so intensely and very deeply of her experiences and her wisdom. Kathleen Gage is, as you may have read from your bio, is an amazing businesswoman and a marketing, I have to say, I don't want to say guru, but she's who I turn to and who a number of people turn to whenever we want to learn about some of the new things that are going on in the marketing world. And Kathleen and I were talking because about a month and a half ago, I ended up signing up for a program she had on learning how to be a podcast guest. And I loved what she had to teach. And she agreed to come on and share with all of you some of the tips and the things that she does and that she would love to share with you to teach you how to become an in-demand podcast guest.
Well, Amy, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on this call and this webinar to share with folks exactly how they can become an in-demand podcast guest. Now, here's the thing about what we're going to talk about today. It's about being a featured expert rather than starting a podcast show. Some people think that they'd be better off to start a podcast show, but I've got to tell you, having been on both sides of the microphone, there's a lot of work involved in putting a podcast show together. So my encouragement to people is that you actually find opportunities to be a featured expert. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about why podcast shows are so great. They expose you to hundreds, sometimes even thousands of listeners for every single podcast that you appear on. And the shelf life can't be beat. Now, there are video podcast shows and there's audio podcast shows. And what I'm covering today could impact either one. You can look for opportunities to be on camera, or you can look at for opportunities to just do the audio. iTunes has a lot of shows listed that are audio only, Blog Talk Radio. YouTube has shows that are obviously video. So it really is a matter of what your personal preferences are, what your goals are, and how comfortable you are being on camera. So let's talk about who I am, and I'll share with you why this is important with what I'm doing. First of all, I've been self-employed since 1994. I've had my current business since 1994. After 25 years in business, I'm actually making a transition to where I'm focusing on a new niche market. I'm still doing all the same things that I've done in the past, but I'm now focusing on a different market. As you can tell by the dogs in the tractor, I live in a rural community just outside of Eugene, Oregon. We've got 5 acres, we've got horses, we've got chickens, we've got one cat now, a few dogs, and we do mostly rescue. I also have been a keynote speaker at many conferences. The image in the upper right, that's a pet conference where there were 600 people at that conference, and I was the keynote speaker. In the lower left-hand corner are images of 2 books that I've done. Over the years, I've done many more than 2. And what's exciting as I move into this new market, which is plant-based eating, the number one strategy that I'm using to get opportunities to market the book is actually with podcast shows, being a guest on podcast shows. And then as a hobby, I like to run. These are some of my finisher medals. Rarely do I come in first unless I'm the only one in my age group. And then the image on the lower right, that is the direction I'm going with my health, with my eating, with the market that I am working with. So why podcast shows? Well, there's a few reasons. One is you get a lot of visibility. Virtually nothing can be beat to get you the visibility that podcast shows can get you. There's an extended market reach. You can have incredible market reach. You can fast track your success as a new author or as a seasoned author. And again, it doesn't matter what genre you write in, whether you're fiction or nonfiction, it really matters that you have a focused approach. There's a very low marketing cost involved with podcasting. You put some marketing material together, you do outreach, you have, in some cases, a phone, other cases, a camera on your computer, a microphone, and you're good to go. And those items are not that expensive nowadays. You know, a good microphone and a good external camera, not that expensive. For under a couple $100, you have a nice recording studio. You can showcase your expertise. And you want to make sure that you're getting on the right podcast shows to showcase your expertise. I've worked with everything from food intuitives, animal communicators, business consultants, fiction authors, nonfiction authors, and each one can showcase their expertise on podcast shows because there are thousands upon thousands of shows to choose from. Podcast shows often lead into sales in a very low-key way. You're not on a podcast show to overtly sell anything, but through telling stories, through talking about your experiences, oftentimes people will go directly to Amazon while you're talking about, let's say, the romance novel that you wrote. Many times while you're doing the podcast show, people are buying your book. So you want to make sure that you have your foundation in place, and I'll be talking about that. It's great for raising awareness about you and your book or books. Podcast shows, what I love about them is they've got a long shelf life. And bottom line is, if you can hold a conversation, you can shine. So what is my experience with podcasting? Over the years, I've done hundreds of interviews on both sides of the microphone. I have decades of experience. And it's a huge part of my book launch strategy then and now. And what I mean by then is for previous book launches, I've used podcast as a big part of my marketing strategy. And as I move forward, podcasting will definitely be a big part of my strategy. And just to show you a little bit of information on some of the shows that I've done. This is a media page on my website. And the reason I have a media page is for the media, obviously, but it also lends itself to credibility. I minimize the risk for a show host. When they come to my page and I send them the link to my page and they see all the interviews I've done. Now, this hasn't been updated in about 4 or 5 years. I mean, I've done so many shows that I don't really need to update, but I've also got my Amazon Central page. If you go here, but let's move back here. But these are all the different shows I've done. And the beauty of being on a show once is when you do a really, really good job, oftentimes the host will have you back again. And let's see if that pulled up, and it did not. Let's see. Let's try Amazon Central. Well, it's not pulling up that page, so let's just go ahead and ignore that. But I will have to check the link on that to make sure that that's hooked up. I've got quotes from and endorsements from show hosts. They basically are saying, I'm the cat's meow, and that's what you want them to say about you. I also have several images on my page. Now, in that I'm in the plant-based space, I can have images like this that work really well. I can have images like this that work really well. I can also have the more professional, quote-unquote, middle-of-the-road kind of images. So whatever your branding is, you want to make sure that you have the right information for that branding. Okay, so let's talk about some people that are really well known within their industry, but when they first started out, they weren't known at all. They actually, they used podcasting to get a lot of visibility and become a recognized name within their market. Rich Roll wrote a book called Finding Ultra. He's an ultra marathoner, and he actually went plant-based. You'll see a number of examples with plant-based because that's the area that I'm focusing on right now with my next book. But He went plant-based, dropped 50 pounds, went from nearly having a heart attack at the age of 40 to becoming a rock star within the plant-based community and the marathon community. He did a lot of his initial visibility building through podcasting as a podcast guest. He now has a podcast show that's very popular, but when he first started out, he was a guest on podcast shows. David Goggin, same thing. He wrote a book. I don't know what the name of the book is, but if you key in his name on Google, you'll see a ton of information about him. And he has been on hundreds, possibly thousands of podcast shows. When his book got released, it immediately went to New York Times bestseller because he did so much critical mass around podcasting. Mel Robbins, she wrote the book, The 5-Second Rule. She's another one that started out just by being on a lot of podcast shows. Now, notice the common thread here. They were on a lot of podcast shows. It wasn't like they did one or two shows and that was it. Each one of these people took massive action and got massive results. Anybody can go from total obscurity to becoming very famous and very well known within a market. Some people say, well, I really don't want to. But the reality is if you want to sell your books, regardless of what genre you write in, regardless of whether you're fiction or nonfiction, people have to know that you exist. The more engaging you are, the more they feel like they know you as a person, the more likely it is they're going to buy your book. Rip Esselstyn, he's another one within the plant-based industry. He's done a lot of podcasting, and he's definitely a rock star within that industry. And then Lewis Howes. He's been on the Ellen DeGeneres show. He's been on a number of big shows. He started out as a LinkedIn expert many years ago. I actually did an affiliate campaign with him probably 10 years ago. And now he's a force to be reckoned with, and he attributes a lot of his success to the number of podcast shows that he was on. So think in terms of what shows can I get on? How often can I do some podcasting? Myself, this week is the first week that we're really launching my whole message around plant-based eating. This week, I've been on 3 shows. And the reason I tell you this is because this is just the tip of the iceberg. My goal is to be on 3 shows a day. And the beauty of shows is you can have shows that are 15 minutes, a half hour, an hour long. When you're the guest, all you need to do is find the right opportunities, show up, do a great job, and you're done. That's it. The host will be the one editing it. The host will be the one uploading it. The host will be the one who does most of the marketing around it. However, one of the things I always tell the host is I will give the show that I'm on a lot of social media love, because the more that I help them promote it, the more likely it is that they're going to have me back on their show. So you want to think of the long term, which ties into the before, during, and after. Before you're on a show, you want to lay a solid foundation. I'll be talking about that very shortly. During the show, you want to be yourself. Don't try to be somebody you're not. Don't be rigid. Just be yourself, because the more you are who you are, the more people are either going to resonate with who you are or not. You don't have to please everybody. You just have to please the people who want to hear from you. That's it. Tell stories, because stories are what make people remember you. With Rich Roll on his story, I remember the story of him telling how he walked up the stairs. It was the night before his 40th birthday. At step 8, he had to stop because he was out of breath. He was so overweight, and he realized something dramatic had to change. That's when he decided to do a cleanse. It was a 2-week cleanse. His wife was already into plant-based eating. She helped him with the cleanse. He felt like garbage during that 2-week period, but one thing led to another, and now he's completely plant-based. I remember that story. I can't tell you all the facts and figures about Rich Roll, but I can certainly tell you his stories. People will be able to tell your stories. Next, give high value. If you've written a nonfiction book and it's a how-to book, give some tips directly out of the book that will encourage people to go and buy the book. If it's a book on how to do podcast shows, well, why not tell people exactly how to do the podcast shows, because there's more in your book too. So you give them some really great information, and that encourages them to go buy your book. Remember the end game. The end game is, why are you on the podcast show in the first place? Is it just to be interviewed, or is it because you want to lead people to your social media channels? Is it because you want to sell books? Is it because you want to get speaking engagements? Is it because you have a book tour coming up? Always remember your end game. And after the show, be sure that you have a good follow-up plan in place. Part of your foundation is having a way for people to get on your subscriber list, which I'll be talking about very shortly. Think long-term. What I mean by that is, are you visible online? Are you doing something every day to get visible online? It's gotten very, very crowded in the online space. And more every day, people are coming on and crowding the marketplace. What can you do to keep really visible online? Are you easy to find? In other words, do you have a blog? Do you have a website? Do you have your social media channel set up? Are you branded properly? Do you have some kind of a giveaway on your blog or your website? Do you have a landing page that people can sign up for something? What is your follow-up plan once people sign up for your thing? Can you lead listeners and viewers gently through your success stories? Like I shared with you about Rich Roll. What is your success story that you can share with people that lead them into the next level of getting to know you? All of these things are about the long term. So let's take a look at some of the foundational aspects of getting ready for podcasting. Determine why you want to be on the podcast shows. Again, it's not just to be interviewed. Is it to promote books? Is it to promote a book signing? Is it to talk about the characters of your book because you're building a relationship with your market? Is it to talk about your writing style and how you get over writer's block because you're promoting a writer's conference? What is the main reason that you want to be on the podcast show? Is it to increase your visibility? Is it to simply get some name recognition? A great example of two people that really did well, this was in the day where it was mostly radio, but nowadays the name podcast and radio show can be interchangeable. But Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, when they were promoting the first Chicken Soup book, they actually were on as many as 5, 6, 7 shows a day. And people say, oh, they're so lucky. Nope, luck had very little to do with it. A lot of hard work, a lot of persistence, a lot of go-gettedness, if that's even a word, go-gettedness, really was where it was at for them. And the rest, as they say, is history. Set up your website or blog, your social media platforms, and an ethical bribe for people to opt in. The more you can do that, the better off you're going to be. Look at your marketing materials, such as your expert one sheet, your intro and questions, your media outreach letter. I'll share all of that with you very shortly. I'll show you some examples. Be very proactive because, again, one show is not going to make that much difference. If you're going to put effort into putting your one sheet together, your intro and questions, your bio, your media outreach letter, you need to put a lot of effort into finding the shows, because putting the marketing material together is great, but getting the shows is even better. Do as many shows as possible to get really good at what you do. The more you do it, the easier it gets, the more comfortable you become, the more comfortable with hosts you become. It's a natural evolution. Send a copy of your book to the host ahead of time. I like to send a physical copy, and here's why. When I send a physical copy, I can autograph the book to the show host, and they often, if it's a video podcast, they'll hold the book up while we're talking, and they'll say, oh, Kathleen, I read your book, Power Up for Profits, and they'll hold it up. As I move into the plant-based market, believe me, I'm going to send physical copies of my book to the show, books I should say, to the show hosts, because I want them to hold the book up. I want it to be something that is familiar to people. So send a copy of your book that's signed to the host. And check your fear at the door. What I mean by that is, don't try to be perfect. I've talked to people that got great opportunities and then they freaked out. They were like, oh my gosh, all these people are going to listen to me. What's going to happen? And they get terrified. And what I encourage them to do is just think of it as a conversation with the host. The more relaxed you can be, the better the conversation is going to be. So those are a few things to look at. Now, some of your preparation material, These are a few things that you definitely want to have prepared before you approach a host. Your media request letter, basically that talks a little bit about you, why you're a good fit for their show, what your experience is, and keep it to about 1 page. Your expert one sheet, and I'll be showing you an example very shortly, but an expert one sheet basically has a little bit about you. It has topics you speak on. It has endorsements from other show hosts. If it's a speaker's expert one sheet, it has endorsements from meeting planners. It might have logos of shows that you've been on. All of those are included in an expert one sheet. Your bio, you want to have various word counts. You could have a 50 to 100 word, you can have a 250 word, and then you can have a 500 word bio. Headshots or photos, as you saw, some of my photos are not your traditional type photos. They really align with the message of fitness and health and plant-based eating. And if I'm speaking to a corporate group, I might go ahead and send the more professional, if you will, looking photo. But keep in mind, professional is all relative to the market. A book cover image that you can send to the host so that they can use it in their promotional material. And host it on your website. What I'm going to show you here is an example from a client of mine. And she wrote a book called The Food Codes. Her name is Lana Nelson, and we call her Lana from Montana because that's where she's from. She has a really nice website, as you can see. So her website is all set up. She also has a nice giveaway right here. Get the free book, The Top 10 Energy Foods, and it's all located at thefoodcodes.com. And she also has a media room. When you click on the media room, it takes you to a room that has the image of her book. It has a nice image of her. It's got a nice endorsement. It's got the media contact information. I happen to be her media contact person. It's got her full bio, which you always want to put the most important information at the beginning, because if the host just grabs a little bit of it, then since she's new to doing interviews, we're posting interviews as she does them. She's got more headshots in different colors so the host can pick what they want. She's got different types of images of her book. Then she's got her expert one sheet. So I talked about the need to have an expert one sheet. This is Lana's expert one sheet. And the nice thing is if you have a source file on this, it simply means that you can customize it according to the show or the industry. But it has a little bit about her. Right up here, speaker, author, intuitive nutritionist, wellness educator. It's got a copy of her book. It's got the topic that she speaks on. It's got a little bit about Lana right here. Then on the second page, rave reviews, and then more information about her book, some contact information, and specialized skills. That's a one sheet. You want to get it designed professionally. You don't want to do it yourself. Other information on her media page is an introduction. We've got a short introduction. It should take no more than 30 seconds to do an introduction. You don't want it to extend beyond 30 seconds because people want to get into the meat of what you're going to be talking about. Here are some recommended questions. However, don't be attached to your questions. You can give the questions to the host because some will use all the questions, others will use the first one, and then you go into a conversation and that's it. So don't worry if they don't use all your questions. I've had some clients who were so attached to those questions, I said, you can't be. You've got to let the host go where they want to go with this interview. And we had one situation where my media outreach person had sent all the information to the host. We send them the interview intro and questions. We send them the expert one sheet. They've obviously gotten the media request letter. We send them the headshots. So we have a check and balance. We make sure they get everything they need. We ask them to confirm that they got the information. Well, Natalie had sent the information to one of the hosts, her support person. The support person said, thank you so much. This is so helpful. I appreciate you sending the information. Natalie keeps those emails. And what happened was the support person never sent it to the host. So when our client got on the interview, the host had put together a completely different introduction, had completely different questions, had an image that she took off the internet from years ago, and the client was like, you didn't do what you said you were going to do. We had the email that said, thank you for sending all this information. You want to make sure that you also know that the host got the information. So that's one more piece we've added to the check and balance when we work with clients. So those are a few of the things that you want to look at. The media request letter for Lana. This is what it looks like. We add in her book image, an image of hers. Food Intuitive, Lana Nelson shatters the myth, diets are a one-size-fits-all formula. So we could change that according to what the show is about. If it's a show about health and business, we can change the headline. If it's a show about diabetes, we can change the headline. So you want to be able to customize it according to the show. Very important tip there. Okay, then looking for opportunities. So how do you find the opportunities? One, iTunes search is one way. Another, Blog Talk Radio is another way. Let's go ahead and go into Blog Talk, and I'll show you how absolutely simple it is. Let's see, just search Blog Talk, and let's look for fiction authors. Let's see what comes up there. Okay, we've got 72,800 results. So do you think you might be able to get some opportunities? Let's do romance novel fiction authors. Okay, 2,600. And so there you go. But here's the thing. Once you find the show, then you have to go and take a look at the show, see how many episodes they have, where do you get in touch with these people.
This show brought to you by Circle of Seven.
Okay, so what you do is you have to be logged in, and then it'll give you some contact information, and basically you're going on a treasure hunt to grab information. You can find Felicity at her website. Okay, this would be one place that you could go to contact Felicity, and I'm doing this all off the cuff. I don't even know if her webpage is live. And we'll see. We're waiting. Okay, there we go. Mighty Women. Okay, the Rand's Day on. Okay, so obviously she's very active. But interesting point. Her last show was January 6, 2019, December 26, 2018. So not as active as some, but it could be a good opportunity. Visit profile. There, you're bound to find some contact information. So again, it's just a long, drawn-out process. And in a little bit, I'm going to show you a real nice hack that will save you about 90% of the time that it takes to look for opportunities. Another one is you can go to iTunes, and you can actually go to new and noteworthy shows and take a look at what's there. You can look at featured collections, inspiring women. But let's do a search on fiction writers. And it's right up here in the upper right-hand corner. Let's take a look and see what comes up. And it will bring up some shows. It's taking a moment. And for some reason, it's not wanting to show, so let's try authors. Let's see if it brings up anything there. And, okay. That's my previous show. Okay, and here's shows that I've done. Okay, let's... Okay, obviously that's not going to work. So, but iTunes, searching out on iTunes is a great way. Okay, so doing a Google search. Real simple way is that you actually do a Google search. Let's go back on, I'll show you on a Google search. Okay, so let's do podcast shows featuring romance authors. Okay, let's try that. See what, okay, 11 of the best podcasts for romance readers. Romance readers will love these 17 podcasts, 5 podcasts. So right here we have 32, 33 shows. and Best Romance Novels podcast. Lots and lots and lots of opportunity. But again, one of the things you want to look at is doing the research to find the host name, to find the contact information, to find out how recently they've had episodes. All of that is really important, but a Google search can bring up quite a bit. And again, it's just kind of a long, drawn-out process if you go these routes. But this is the route to go. And then you keep a spreadsheet. Okay, the process is you key it in by genre or show type. You key it in by the host name. If you know of a particular host, you want to go listen to a couple of episodes. And the bigger the show and the harder it is to get on the show, do more homework, because hosts will be very impressed if they know that you've done your homework. And then by general topic, those are some of the ways. Here's an opportunity hack, how to find opportunity. Find people in your space, your niche, and your market. Track what they're doing. So let's say in my space, plant-based eating, the new market I'm going into, I do research on all the leading experts a lot. Then what I do is I actually go to social media. I've created a spreadsheet, but I'll go to social media. I'll connect with them on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever they are. And Twitter, for example, if they tweet something, I'm going to retweet it and I'm going to make a comment. For example, Rich Roll. If he tweeted something about doing a marathon, I'll write something like, I really love what you're doing, Rich. I read your book, Finding Ultra, love it. Boom. That gets me on his radar. So that way, when I ask to be on his show, I'm not going to be a stranger to him, because somebody like him, it can take a long time to get on their show unless you have a New York Times bestseller. Then it becomes a whole different conversation. But for most authors, it is something that you have to get on their radar and not appear desperate, but appear like you're there to help them, and you really want to create a win-win situation. So that's one hack. During the show, some of the things you want to do. You want to stay on track. It's really important to stay on track. You want to tell stories that are memorable. I told you the Rich Roll story about him being the night before he was 40. He went up 8 steps, and I can recite that story because I've heard it a few times, but it's a memorable story. You want to create value for the audience. Again, if in fact you're there to share how you build characters, how you create your characters in the book, go into a lot of detail. Give them the nitty-gritty if that's what they're there to hear. If they just want to hear about your life story as an author, give them that. But be willing to talk with the host like you're talking with a friend, because basically you're having a fireside chat with people. Make the host look great. Call them by name. Thank them for being on the show. All of that really makes a difference. Remember to mention any offers the host gave you permission to talk about. If you are going to be making an offer, you want to make sure that you got permission from the host. I don't recommend that you try to sell something directly from the show. However, you might have a gift, and you might be able to say, you know, for my new book, Beginner's Guide to Plant-Based Eating, what I would like your listeners to do, or what I'd like people to do, is go ahead and go to plantbasedeatingforhealth.com, and there's a place for you to get the book for free. So only when the host has given you permission. Really, really important. And smile. If it's audio only, you might stand up because your physiology changes the way your voice projects. And be conscious. You might even put a yellow sticky on your computer screen to remind you to smile and have fun. That's the big one, have fun. A lot of people take this way too seriously, and the more fun you have, unless it's a topic that's really a heavy topic, even then, like maybe you're a grief counselor, sometimes you can put in some fun, playful, memorable stories. I mean, I've got stories of when I was my mom's caretaker that in some ways are pretty funny. At the time, it was not funny, but now I look back and it's like, wow, that was pretty funny. And I can share that if my topic happens to be grief management. After the show, this one's a big one that a lot of people don't do. Probably 99% of the featured experts don't do. Send a thank you card, a physical, put a stamp on it, thank you card that you have handwritten. Don't send a card where it's automated. Send a card where you've actually spent time thinking about it. I can't tell you the number of times when I get a card, what that means to me. When I, maybe from a client, I actually send clients handwritten cards. Actually, Lana from Montana, the food codes woman, she should be getting her card today. Every so often, I just write a card saying, I really appreciate you. I love working with you. You're such an inspiration. Boom, I send it out. That's the price of a stamp and a card to create a deeper relationship. And you want to do that with the hosts. Get the permalink to the show. What the permalink is the direct link to the show. And post it on your own media page. And you might even upload it. If it's a video podcast, upload it to your YouTube channel, again, asking permission. Promote it on all your social media channels. Send an email out to your list about it, and you can even write a blog about it. I do that with my show that I'm doing, and I'll show you very shortly what that is. Okay, so this is my blog. It's Plant-Based Eating for Health, and with this blog, I actually I will post when I've done an interview with one of my guests. So, Conscious Living with Madeline Eno. Let's see, this was me before plant-based eating. This is me now. Intuitive eating. I interviewed Lana. I have one gentleman that lost 105 pounds as a result of plant-based eating. And what I do is I write a blog post about the interview that I did with them. And by doing that, I get a lot of traction. And you can do that with the interviews that you have, is you can post any interviews. Here's one woman who dropped 120 pounds. Okay, so what we do is we simply click over to that post, and her interview is inside the post. You can do that with your interviews. Okay, so here's her before and after. Here's her interview, and people can click over and they can actually go to the YouTube channel. So this is her before, this is her after. She's got a phenomenal story, and we've gotten quite a few people viewing this particular video. So that's just another way that you can get more traction. When you do an interview, post it on your own website. And actually, I believe with Lana on her YouTube channel, we've been doing that. So it's a nice way to get added traction. Okay, so then okay, what I'm doing, I want to give you an example of real-time work on what I'm doing with podcasting to grow my plant-based eating market. So I'm growing a market reach in a brand new market for me. It's the plant-based eating market. Amazingly, when I first started eating plant-based, I didn't see it as a way to make that part of my business model. But the longer I'm involved in it, the more I see that it makes perfect sense with all the marketing knowledge, the book marketing knowledge, the publishing knowledge, to transfer that knowledge over to people who write books about veganism, plant-based eating, and wellness. And there's a lot of people writing these kinds of books that don't know how to market themselves. They don't know how to get on podcast shows. So I can still work in several markets. It's just that I'm branding myself in that market too. So plant-based eating actually is the largest growing industry in 2019. It's crazy how big it's getting. My goal is to transition much of my products and service offerings to this market. So I can take a program that was branded for, let's say, coaches and consultants, and I can change out a few things like the cover. I can change out some of the verbiage in the beginning of a product, and it becomes very customized for the plant-based market. I've created the Beginner's Guide to Plant-Based Eating ebook. I showed you that. And that is my lead generator. I also have a Facebook group that drives people from the ebook into the Facebook group and vice versa. I'm writing a physical book. I've updated my expert one sheet. I'm looking for targeted speaking opportunities. Okay, so let me share with you some of what I'm doing with the books that I'm writing. I have 2 books in the works right now. One is more of a concept than it is an actual book at this point in time. The concept is to find 10 to 15 authors who can be a part of an anthology book. Now, the distinction is with most anthology books, the author has to pay for that opportunity. What I'm doing is I'm finding the authors first, then I put a proposal together and I find a sponsor who offsets all the costs. So the authors truly are wanted in this book because of who they are, not because they can pay me money to be in this book. It's really about you have something so valuable that I want you in this book. Once I get at least 10 authors saying, yes, I want to be a part of this project, full well knowing that the book is a concept right now, that we need to go out and find the funding. So I get a yes from them, I put a proposal together, and I go to potential sponsors who will offset all the costs to produce the book and to market it, including some Facebook advertising, including some a website, including an Amazon launch. All of that will be included in the proposal. So it's a pretty substantial amount of money that I'm looking for from a sponsor. But you look at companies like Beyond Meats, the Impossible Burger, some of the bigger companies that are taking over the marketplace, they may be very interested in sponsoring this book as long as I have all my ducks in a row. Well, then what happens is all of these authors likely have a podcast show. I will be on their podcast show and they'll be on my podcast show. And then we'll look for other opportunities to be on podcast shows. My marketing person will look for opportunities for all the authors to be on podcast shows. This is all the benefit of being a part of this book launch. And again, it's a concept right now. It's just an idea that I'm starting to flush out. The other one is I'm writing a book called Discover the Real Fountain of Youth, Plant-Based Eating for Health. That's one I'm writing by myself. That's one that I will promote primarily through podcasting and book signings. Secure podcast interviews on various types of shows. With what I'm doing, I sat down, put pen to paper, and I said, okay, what are all the possible hooks and angles that I could use to get on a show? Well, obviously, plant-based eating, obviously. What about business? I have owned my business for 25 years. I'm going to be working with authors in that genre. It's still business related. What about self-help? Eating plant-based helps you to lose weight. It helps you to take care of yourself. It helps you to live a better quality of life. All of this has been documented by science. And so I can be on self-help shows. I can be on health and nutrition shows, and I don't have to be a health and nutrition expert. I can speak from my personal experience of the journey that I've taken as a plant-based eater. So as I'm sharing this, I want you to think, what are the angles, what are the hooks that you could use with your particular book, with your expertise, with your niche? Others would be exercise. For my 65th birthday coming up in about 6 weeks, I'm doing a half marathon. I went to the gym this morning. I did a spin class. Tonight I do a yoga class. I do weight training. So I'm a real avid enthusiast around exercise. So I can get on programs to do with women in their middle age and beyond who exercise. That would be a hook. Others would be seniors. Oh my gosh, I actually just recently talked to Social Security about my Medicare. I'm going to be 65. I can't believe it. But that gives me leverage. So all of these are hooks. All of these are angles that I can use for a book on plant-based eating. So think in terms of what you can do with your book, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whether it's a book about a geographic region, whether it's a book about a certain kind of eating protocol, whether it's a book about relationships, whether it's a romance novel, whether it's a mystery novel. Just think in terms of what are all the hooks that you can find shows for. So the process that I'm using for my book, and you can work it around what you're doing with yours to get on podcast shows. Step one, I've clearly defined my purpose and my market. I know why I want to get on podcast shows. I'm very clear on that. And for me, more is better. If I can do 3, 4, 5 shows a day, once the book comes out, I'm going to be crushing it. And I have no hesitation around doing that. I also, with the purpose, I'm in addition to the book, I have programs. I will have information products. I will have live training. I will have consulting. I will have speaking opportunities. So I'm very clear that the podcast shows open up a world of opportunity for me. I'm integrating my blog, YouTube channel, my podcast on my YouTube channel, and all my social media platforms. I've already done that. I've had the banner design done for all social media and my blog. I'm promoting the Beginner's Guide to Plant-Based Eating giveaway, and I'm proactively seeking speaking opportunities and podcasting opportunities, and I'm reaching out to movers and shakers on various social media platforms. So this is the process I'm using. You can use this process for what you're doing too. The challenges that you face. The number one challenge is, if you're new to this, it can seem very overwhelming and very intimidating, and it can be. So you have to work around that and just do one thing at a time. Have a checklist of here's all the things that I need to do. The time involved in finding shows. You know, you can do a Google search, have a whole bunch of shows come up, but then you have to organize the shows in a way that it makes sense. Are they active shows? How often do they interview people? Do they interview people? What's the contact information of the host or their support person? What's the link to their show channel? Things of that nature. You have to get all that information. And my recommendation is spend some time up front doing that for a couple, 2-3 hours, and then go out and look for the opportunities rather than finding one show, sending out information, finding another show, sending out information. Keeping everything in order, developing all your marketing material, all of these are challenges, but they're not insurmountable. If you break it down and you have a checklist and you do a little something every day, before you know it, you'll get done. I'm going into a whole new market, and I've already got all my social media channels set up. I've got a new blog. I've got my Expert One Sheet. I've got my media outreach letter. I've got my introduction to my questions, because I wrote a list of everything I needed to do. And I actually am going to make that list available to you through a program that I offer. Not being proactive enough, that can be a challenge. Some people, they'll try it for a little while. I had one gentleman who said, I've tried for 3 days to get some shows and I only got 2 opportunities. It's like, those are 2 opportunities that are the start of what could be many opportunities. You've got to start right where you're at. And initially, it may take you a little longer to get those opportunities than if you have been doing this for a while. Once you've been doing it for a while, you have name recognition to the hosts. Filling your pipeline with fresh leads on an ongoing basis. Here's some of the essentials that you need. This particular image, the pink image here, is from my Power Up for Profits one-sheeter. It's a 2-sided document. And what I've done is, for the plant-based industry, notice I've changed the color. The image in the upper left-hand corner is different. This is still the same image, so that's not a big deal at all. I've got logos of companies I've spoken at, because this is used also for speaking. So this is one piece of material that you need. Get it professionally designed. If you get the source file, you can go in and make the changes yourself. You don't need to hire a designer every time you get it done. You also want a good calendar. You also want your media outreach letter, and that should be in a Word document that you can update as needed, and you customize it for the show and the angle. For example, I gave you all those examples of, I can go after plant-based, business, self-help, health and nutrition, exercise, seniors. I can customize my media outreach letter according to the show. And this is such an important document. This is a spreadsheet that I recommend you keep in chronological order by the date, so that you can see what shows you have coming up that you're going to be getting interviewed for. You've got to keep real close track of that, because there is nothing worse. It's the kiss of death if you book a show and you don't show up. I had something happen recently where we had terrible, terrible snowstorms in our area. Everything was shut down. We had no access. I had to find a way to get a message to the host and say, I can't be on the show because we don't have internet access. So you want to keep really, really close contact. What I like to do when I have people on my show, I send them a reminder 48 hours ahead of the show. And I also, when I'm on a show, I'll just send a message to the host saying, I'm really looking forward to being on your show in a couple of days. Is there anything else you need? I'll be on the show 5 minutes early, yada, yada, yada. I basically tell them, don't worry, I've got this covered. So those are some of the essentials that you is to find time to get the shows. It can be a real challenge that finding that actual time. The solution is a high-value directory of shows, and I've got the solution for you, and it's very, very affordable. So the solution is called the Directory of Podcast Show Listings, Directory of Resources of Podcast Show Listings. Right now, we have 162 show listings of various genres. They're current listings. We updated this about within the last 30 days. Every 2 to 3 months, we update it. Anybody who gets the directory gets the updates for free. There's no added charge to it. You get an example of your Expert One sheet. You get an example of a media outreach letter, so you don't have to sit there and spin your wheels trying to figure out what to put in there. Just look at what I've created and use that as a model of what you can create for yours. You get several video trainings. The first is Insider Secrets to Being a Rock Star Guest. The next one, and these were live trainings, these two that I'm reading right now, those were live trainings I did. We recorded them. They were for people who got the podcast directory, so you get some actual training I did with the people who got the directory, how to get the most out of podcast interview opportunities. These were not trainings that I did with a group. I just put these together because I know these are key points of what people need to know on how to give a great interview and finding great show opportunities training video. So as an added bonus, the total value of this, by the way, is $700. I mean, getting 162 show listings with all the details, that's quite a bit. Anyone who gets the full program within the next 24 hours also receives a one-on-one 15-minute call with me, Kathleen Gage. You and I sit down and we evaluate the best course of action for you to take based on how skilled you are with podcast shows, where your greatest challenges reside. And in that 15 minutes, we get a lot done. So you'll come to the call prepared with 1 or 2 questions. We dig right in. We don't do a lot of small talk. It's like, okay, tell me where you're at. What are you trying to accomplish? Boom. I go in and I help you to evaluate what you need to do. Once you sign up, I'll email you a link to book the call. You get the link once. It's like it's in the first thank you message, and all you need to do is go to powerupforprofits.com, Amy Directory. That's powerupforprofits.com, Amy Directory. You go to that, it'll take you to a page. The page looks like this. Okay, so you get a lot of great information. There's a video, you can turn that on, but here's information. Receive a ready-to-use directory with 160 plus fresh podcast and radio shows looking for experts like you. Discover how to find unlimited number of shows. Receive a training on how to be a rock star expert. Okay, so you get all that. Plus you get a checklist of what you need to do to prepare for a show. You get the directory, you get an example of an Expert One sheet, you get a media outreach letter, you get how to give a great interview, all of this for one low price of $47. It's worth more with the call that I'm giving you than $397, but you get all of this for only $47. Now remember, the call is you have to get the directory within the next 24 hours. The reason I do this is I know that if you're ready to do this, you'll make the decision today. And I've put aside a lot of time for these 15-minute calls because I anticipate a lot of people are going to want to get this directory. The directory is chock full of great shows. And again, all you need to do is go to powerupforprofits.com/Amy, A-M-Y, directory, and you'll be taken to the page. Go ahead and click through on that. Order your directory, and you can get started right away with getting on podcast shows. This is Kathleen Gage. Thank you so much, Amy, for having me on your show. I've really enjoyed it, and I know that those who are serious about going out and getting a lot of visibility can apply this information and get results immediately. And my job is to make it easier by providing this directory. Have a great day.